Welcome back to Spin Cycle Podcast, everybody. I'm Caley Fretz.
I'm Kit Nicholson.
I'm Jonny Long.
And we got a great show for you today. Today, the Worlds are on. Remco has breakfast, and there are updates to the Tashkent cycling story, plus lots more. Let's get into it. Welcome to Worlds Week, everybody. Worlds is on in Switzerland. Kit kicked off over the weekend. Can you give me a little wrap? Can you get everybody updated? If anybody missed the weekend's racing, who's going to wear rainbow stripes next year, and who just earned some rainbow stripes but isn't going to wear them next year?
Well, yeah, so we had both the men's and women's races on Sunday afternoon, and it was a pretty good course, finishing up the side of Lake Zurich. Finishing in Zurich itself. The women's race came down to a battle for gold between Demi Vollering, whose home is in Switzerland, or whose training home is in Switzerland, and Grace Brown, Olympic champion and retiree Grace Brown. And brilliantly, Brown took the gold, took the rainbows. She has promised she'll ride the Chrono des Nations next month to finish off the season, so she will wear the rainbows, but she has also promised she will not be reconsidering her retirement, which I hugely respect. Why not? And then in the men's race, there was only really one favourite, Remco Evenepoel, and he delivered, though it was close between him and Philippe Ganna in the battle for victory, only by 6 seconds. Evenepoel did complete the ride on feel, having broken or disconnected his power meter before the start, but yeah, it was an emphatic celebration, if not a kind of absolutely dominant win.
Yeah, his chain fell off right on the start ramp?
Yeah.
Was that what happened?
He pedalled backwards.
Can't be doing that.
Nah, not with a dinner plate on your chain link.
I mean, it's actually kind of shocking that doesn't happen more often, because they're all running drivetrains these days that are like completely out of spec, right? Like they're not what these derailleurs are designed to handle. A lot of them are on one bys. Like they're funky systems, right? And so you pedal backwards a little bit and your chain falls off. The podium photo, the men's podium photo, I found quite enjoyable. It very much looked like their little brother was gifted a victory in team sports day or school sports day.
I loved the way Ganna draped Eduardo Affini's arm around Evenepoel and then draped himself over the two of them, basically. It was this kind of brilliant, this is how you do it. And it was Affini's first World Championship medal, period. He hasn't even, he never got a world medal in junior or under 23. So it was a very good result for Italy, and I think a very good result for Ganna, despite not winning, because he's been a bit off the boil. But yeah, podium looked like a lot of fun.
Well, Ganna's finished second behind Evenepoel now at 2 consecutive Worlds and at the Olympics. And then also, I think, the most recent Giro d'Italia time trial the two have competed in. So he's just used to having to flop that left arm around Evenepoel. He knows flop
it downwards.
The things Filippo Ganna is good at: number 1, time trialing; number 2, putting his arm around Remco Evenepoel.
At least he's still got our record and all that stuff, right? He's done some things Remco hasn't done yet, which is good, because you have to feel for him.
Yeah, you really do. He bowed out of the Renui Tour, where there was a time trial. He did bow out the day of the time trial. Fatigue was that bad that he couldn't bring himself to ride a 15k time trial. And there was a quote with his withdrawal saying, there was something wrong. There was some fatigue going on that he just couldn't find the numbers, so he needed a break. And he's not. He went. This year the Olympics was his major target, both the time trial and of course the track, where he and his teammates were defending team pursuit champions. And he came away with a silver behind Evenepoel, as Jonny said, and a bronze in the team pursuit. So those are great results, but for Ganna, he was hoping for a lot more. So it's good to see him at least enjoying himself at the end of the season.
I have 2 people I feel more sorry for than Filippo Ganna. Number 1, Josh Tarling, who finished 4th
again
in both the Olympics and World Time Trial, who had really great quotes with Cycling News afterwards saying he's tired of learning and he just wants to be good. Which I think is such a universal thing.
Everyone keeps telling him as well, you're only 20, it's all an experience, right? Yeah. And he's like, blow that. I'm a former European champion.
Yeah. The other person is Stefan Kung, because he like comes into these things now in the past few years when you have these people like Ganna and Evenepoel being like, yeah, I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling, best I ever have. Like I can maybe do something, and then he just ends up finishing like top 10, but like 8th on Sunday. But I just feel,
in Switzerland.
At what point in Switzerland as well? But at what point do you have to? Are you still a time trial specialist if you don't? This seems harsh, but are you still a time trial specialist if you're not competing for these big victories?
Well, I think he's acknowledged, although obviously he has just won his first ever World Tour, Grand Tour time trial at the Vuelta. I think he's acknowledged himself.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
But even so, I mean, if you look at the contenders there weren't any really big names in the time trial specialism. But if you look, but he has also, I mean, he was in some of those really mountainous breakaways during the Vuelta. He has, and we've seen him in the classics. He has been starting to diversify his skill set rather like everyone else has, and then you get riders like, I mean, Affini probably is one of the more specific specialists these days, and you see him on the front for Visma Lease bike on flat days, but otherwise he's completely anonymous. But
time trialing,
right?
Trialing on the front,
exactly, dragging along a massive pack of lads while you're training.
When was the last time we had a truly dominant time trial specialist? Because for a while now,
Tony Martin.
I was gonna say either Tony Martin or Fabian Cancellara were the two, right? And because for a while now, when the top GC riders show up, they win the time trials, right? And I think that part of that is some improvements in aerodynamics for those riders, right? Like part of the reason Remco's so damn fast in time trial is he's just like the most he's the most aero human being on the planet, right? So he probably did 85 watts less than Ganna did, but between his weight and his aerodynamics, he still wins, right? And Pogacar is in a similar place. Vingegaard is incredibly aerodynamic. So you got these tiny little dudes who can do a lot of power, not anywhere near as much as somebody like Ganna, but can do a lot of power, and it's enough that when they show up, they can pretty much always put the big boys kind of back in their place, which is second usually, unfortunately for them. And you were kind of waiting for the next big one, right? And we don't know exactly who that's going to be yet, but nobody at the moment is able to
Josh
do it.
Tarling is being told that Josh Tarling is meant to be the, put a time trial completely on the flat and he rinses everyone unless he falls off his bike. Right. But I mean, maybe Alex Sigart can come along and do something.
Like the climb over the weekend wasn't massive, right? No. Like it's not like it was a ride for 30K and then climb for 10. It was like it was a bump basically.
Yeah, and I had a look at the split times. So there were 3 intermediate time checks along a 46 kilometer route, and the most time that Evenepoel took back on Ganna was actually in the third section. So after the climb, he only took 2 seconds on Ganna up the climb. It was on the descent, it was a fairly technical descent, but not the most technical. But it was quite steep in places, so it was a daredevil sort of situation. And maybe his relatively low center of gravity helped him there. But 10 seconds on the downhill, 2 seconds on the up, which is an interesting one for Ganna as well.
Well, also Evenepoel rode the whole thing on feel.
Yeah, that's
which is great.
Which is just like the craziest thing ever. Like to still be able to beat, and it's an argument that maybe they should all be riding on feel. Because you can still do it. Like that shows a skill of being able to actually pace yourself and not having
at least for a championship time trial.
Yourself.
Maybe less so on a Grand Tour when there are the gaps matter a bit more or the retention matters a bit more. But I think I would I'd go for that.
I don't think power meters improve racing at all. I think they only make racing worse.
No.
Yeah, there's no argument to be made for power meters making racing better.
And what made the end of the time trial really tense was that Evenepoel looked really haggard on the bike in the last 3 kilometers. So it's like, will he make it? Will he make it? I mean, he was 19 seconds ahead at the last time check, so he was doing okay. But it just
adds jeopardy in a good way. Like we want races to be safe and everything. So then because of that, I think we need to add jeopardy in other places, which would be you don't know what you're doing. You just have to think about what you're doing.
So if we're looking at the whole season and the men's peloton in particular, if you're going to award, a Ballon d'Or for cycling, right? Like the rider of the year, the men's rider of the year, I actually think it's quite a difficult decision at this point because on one side, you've got Pogacar who's done incredible things this year in the biggest race among others. But on the other side, you've got Remco's year now is pretty stunning, right? Like double Olympics, an ITT World Championship. I mean, who knows what he'll do in the road race? They're getting closer for me in that sort of tallying it up at the end of the season.
I think it depends which way you look at it. From an outside perspective, where the Olympics and World Championships are obviously, they carry a lot of weight without even having to watch. He's definitely going to be a bigger name in the broader scope of things. I think if you think back, Pogačar has won 12 Grand Tour stages at 2 Grand Tours and and won them as well. And then he was featuring in the classics, and he's going to feature on Sunday, isn't he? So I think he takes the biscuit, but we've got recency bias too.
There's a bit of recency bias.
Evenepoel has done a lot since Pogačar did anything.
I also think that there's something to be said for the ability to kind of rise for those single days, right? Like, I don't know, it feels more difficult to me anyway, particularly in something like the Olympic road race, which requires a sort of like tactical nuance that is really, really difficult, right? Like you generally...
For Evenepoel, does it though? He just needs to accelerate once and leave everyone behind.
Yeah, but it was still a lot of things happening in that race, right? Like, I mean, think about the sort of like 2 laps to go going over Montmartre, and like the things are splitting, and like it was still a tactical difficult day. Like, yes, he chose the right moment. He made it look easy, but that doesn't mean it was. And you compare that to, you know, winning a stage of the Tour or winning the Tour. They're just very different. The Tour is still it's on the pedestal, right? It's the highest thing you can possibly do. But
you nearly said it.
But at the same time, if you are the best bike rider, you're almost always going to win the Tour de France. Whereas if you are the best bike rider, there's like no guarantee you're going to be winning the Olympics, right? That if you look back at the winners of the Olympic road race or the World Championships over the years, it's very rarely the like pure strongest rider, particularly with the type of course that we saw. So I think that that's worth a couple extra kind of like points in Remco's favor. If I had to vote today, it's still pretty firmly in Pogačar's corner.
Yes.
But like if we sort of look ahead to this weekend, like if Remco was able to do a double-double, for example, that would be quite cool. It would get really close.
Well, he'd win in the public eye.
Yeah.
Out, away from he'd win for Joe Bloggs down the street.
But I think Pogačar's going to win. I
still think thinking back to Pogačar at the end of the Tour de France when it was Thursday afternoon and it was very clear he was going to win the last 4 stages of the Tour de France. I mean, not very clear. Obviously, there were things that were going to, but it was if anybody tried to do anything and he was still there, he was going to win it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. He won the last 4 stages of the Tour de France and he made it look easy. And I mean, it's easy to think about the double and Evenepoel, the way that he does it as well. It's hard to argue with that. But yeah, I think if I think back to the Giro and the Tour and just how bloody easy he made it, yeah.
You guys are forgetting Van der Poel. Did the double Holy Week and he beat Pogačar in one of them.
True.
So
yeah, but
that's true.
Yeah,
I think that's the hardest.
Yeah, probably.
That's the hardest thing that anyone's
After
done.
Lombardia, we'll have this conversation and we'll make our pick, and we will invent a trophy and we will send it to them, and they will be very confused. I do want to talk about a much bigger story from the weekend, which is an update on Remco Evenepoel's breakfast. Jonny.
Oh, yes. We don't have to talk about biggest seasons now. We could talk about biggest breakfast because we have direct comparisons. So before we get to Remco Evenepoel's breakfast, I believe it was on a previous podcast,
in May.
It
was a tour podcast. I went and dug it out. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we learned about Tadej Pogačar's breakfast. Not sure if it was at the Tour or if this is like a normal training day breakfast. But to quote him, he says, "I eat rice porridge with strawberries and blueberries, then sourdough bread and a small omelette, then waffles with peach and raspberry jam. A long breakfast, about 40 minutes." We all remember that quote, that breakfast concept.
I think this is maybe the preview episode for the Tour. This is the kind of important information you get in preview episodes from us.
So I had to be. Yeah, I was there, so I couldn't have been during the Tour.
Okay, so that was Pogačar's breakfast. We now, courtesy of, I believe it's Remco Evenepoel's YouTube channel, where he's sitting down for breakfast and he's got it all laid out on the table, and then there's like Charlie XCX, Brat Green sort of graphics on the screen, noting down what everything is. So shall I just go ahead and list everything
out? Let's get the full list.
Okay, I'll go from left to right as the breakfast unfolds. We've got a 2-egg omelette with pepper, that looks like just black pepper rather than the vegetable from what I can see, but I could be wrong. It's quite hard to tell from this distance.
I think pepper, I think that those sorts of vegetables in the morning are just surplus because they're basically just water. No? Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
Kit with the pepper takes. Save it for after dark. Okay, after the omelette, bread times 2, which is 70 grams apparently. They look like bagels or like breakfast muffins maybe, with cottage cheese and Philadelphia. That's overkill for my liking.
Philadelphia, like cream
we
cheese?
then have... Yeah, sorry, cream cheese, yeah. Do you not have the Philadelphia brand? No.
Yeah, it's ours.
You do?
But we don't...
Well, then I was wondering why you're defining it for everyone.
We just call it cream cheese because other companies make cream cheese as well. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
Anyway,
we got you.
That's all right. I thought that Philadelphia was like the category. You know, it was a category defining.
I don't think it's like Kleenex.
Anyway.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Okay.
Right in with your opinion.
Let's agree to disagree. Here's how this becomes a 25-minute segment. Okay, after that, green tea with ginger and honey and a flat white. So double sort of hot beverage thing going on. I can also see a glass of water. That's not listed. Then we have oats, 70 grams, cashew nuts, 40 grams, banana, granola, a handful. I guess it depends on whose hand. You'd hope Remco's.
Not Philip Aganas.
Then to go with, not Philip Aganas. To go with that, low-fat yogurt, 250 grams, Rice Krispies, 30 grams, honey balls, 20 grams, which I presume are like, I know what they are in my head.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of breakfasts. Well done if you followed on with all that and still have it all in your brain. What do we think? Remco,
it seems bigger.
Surely.
Yeah, I mean, this is also a time trial breakfast, no?
But shouldn't it be like your time trial breakfast and your Tour de France breakfast should be roughly
probably pretty similar. Yeah.
And if anything, the time trial breakfast should be smaller or at the very least further away from the event, right? Because it's only an hour. You need to digest. The start is going to be more intense than your average tour stage, where you could maybe continue digesting for the first little bit of the tour stage.
Yeah. It all just sounds very beige and boring and sickening almost.
Do you think these guys begin to like loathe meal times when they have to eat this much stuff, or do they need it? I've never done this much exercise to know for myself.
You start to kind of hate it because the amount of calories you have to get in is actually way more than just sort of making you feel full, and so it just gets kind of miserable, particularly in the morning. And if you're stressed out, you don't want to eat. Right, so like eating before a race is really quite difficult. Like your stomach just doesn't, you're just not hungry, but you have to, and so you have to like shovel in just like bland oatmeal and stuff. It's horrible. It's awful.
When I was playing hockey at school, field hockey for our Americans, we play hockey on Saturdays, and I was at a boarding school, so we'd be there on Saturday mornings. We used to, all the sports teams would turn up at the food hall at 10 a.m. to eat massive bowls of pasta, and it was much worse pasta than they'd cook the previous day. In fact, it quite possibly was from the previous day, and I remember just feeling absolutely disgusting before the matches, just eating this massive plate of bland yellow greasy pasta, which I think they probably just coated in oil to try and separate. That's probably not. I mean, I would like to think that Evenepoel had a better chef than we did, but
I was at a boarding school over the weekend, and they had a polo field. It was very fancy.
See, I went to boarding school in the UK, and there was
they turned it into like soccer fields and a baseball field, but it used to be a polo field apparently, and there was a bike race around.
I love Americans.
It was great. Can we talk about?
That's fun.
Well, first of all, have we covered the breakfast in enough depth? Do you think?
I think so.
I now want to know what Jonas Vingegaard's breakfast is like. I'm not going to lie.
We got to find out.
Before I didn't mind, but now I've got like 2 of the 3. I want the third because I can't imagine him eating in that quantity.
Fish.
Just like cloves of garlic.
Do you know what I would like?
Drops it down like a cartoon.
I think we should. I think in the spirit of a sort of the morning after a night out challenge, we should try Evenepoel's breakfast. I think Jonny should try Evenepoel's breakfast before a podcast.
We'll move on in a second, don't worry, Caley. At my old job, it must have been the 2016 Olympics, and I was on an internship before I got the job, and I did an article where I ate like an Olympic swimmer for the day.
Amazing.
To see what it was like without doing nearly enough exercise. So it was just, I think I took the day after off just because I felt so bad. But yeah.
I mean, so like to eat like a Tour de France cyclist for a day would be like if you weren't riding would be genuinely disgusting because you'd have to do breakfast, which would be kind of normal. But then you'd have to eat like 18 gels from like 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. It would be awful. And then you'd have to have dinner afterwards.
Yeah, you'd need to book an appointment with the dentist immediately. Yeah.
We had one of those ice gels when we were interviewing the Visma guy about them. And because it was like quite kind of a hot day and it was a bit like an ice lolly, so you're like, yeah, sure, I'll have this. And then I remember for the car drive afterwards, I just felt so bad.
Weirdly salty. Yeah.
Oh.
Not a fan. Yeah. Hey, can we need to move on. We will. We're going to find out what Jonas Vingegaard's breakfast is, and we will bring you this important information, and then we will discuss at length. However, I want to talk about the future a little bit. So the U23 and junior races over the weekend, there were a couple storylines that came out of this. Jonny, give me the Cat Ferguson update.
So Cat Ferguson, if you don't know, 18-year-old Brit, signed with Movistar, starting next year, but riding now as a stagiaire, won her third ever pro race last week. Not a huge race, but like sizable enough. A few names there. More importantly, this week, just won the junior women's time trial world title to add to World Omnium and Team Pursuit, and now has the road race to go. She's like the next one of these like youth prospects that's watched for a while, bursts through. Patrick Bro from Lanterne Rouge was saying it's sort of an Evenepoel and that era a few years ago that's now happening in the women's peloton. We've got a few of these young prospects who are now coming in and immediately sort of making a mark.
She also raced cyclocross. She got silver medal in cyclocross Worlds last year. So she's a proper multi-hyphenate.
Movistar as the sort of development pipeline for a lot of these riders is a somewhat unusual thing, just on the face of it, particularly if you consider, like it's generally pretty Spanish. But if you look at the roster these days, it's actually mostly not Spanish, particularly the women's team. Kat will not be the first one to kind of come. Like Sarah Gigante is another example, right? Sarah Gigante came in with a huge amount of talent, Aussie rider, and has since moved on to AG Insurance, but spent a couple years with Movistar. Not, I would say, the smoothest years for her, but it's still unusual to have this be the pathway into the pro ranks. You wouldn't think that for a British rider that Movistar would be the first choice, right? But
you have to imagine that she would have had a lot of offers.
Yeah,
she would have had offers. So I would imagine, there were quite a few who wanted her signature. So she probably got a good deal out of Movistar.
Well, and like looking at that roster for this year, I mean, it's probably at this point an English-speaking team, right? Like it's Canadians, French, Slovenian, German, like Leon Lippert, for example, another Brit, Arlena Sierra. Like there's a lot of sort of international. It's an international team at this point, so maybe it does make more sense than you'd first imagine. And I think it's interesting that the two, because the men's team has still stayed pretty Spanish and has tried to stay pretty Spanish, but the women's team clearly is taking a different tack and will probably end up benefiting from it, right? Because you just open up your the opportunity to pull in really top end riders that way.
The youngsters at Movistar have been doing rather well this weekend. On the under-23 side for the men, Ivan Romeo, who you might recognise his name because he's been in a number of World Tour breakaways, which might bring us to one of our topics of discussion today, which I've been looking forward to.
I have two things here. First of all, if you want to know who's going to be really, really good 5 years from now, the junior time trial is what you look at, right? Junior road race, you can look at that, and sometimes it's a hit rate. The hit rate for the time trial is like 100%. Because it's just a Watt test. It's like whoever wins is going to be good, guaranteed. So Romeo, perfect example.
And the young French chap is a very good English speaker as well, isn't he, Jonny?
Oh yeah, he was swearing his head off. I wrote about it in the newsletter yesterday when he won. Paul Seixas, I think is his name. I don't know how to pronounce it.
It looks,
but yeah, he's good. Decathlon Asia Tour, Le Mondial. So they're still doing bits. They'll be on the up and up.
Their development has always been good, hasn't it?
Yeah. And now they've got, the back end decathlon. I'm just trying to click through to the previous. What year shall I pick to see who's become good from the junior time trial? 2018?
Well, yeah, you've got to go back quite a long time because most of them are still under 23. Yeah. I don't mean most of them.
The hit rate isn't. I should say I looked at this before, and the hit rate when I went through and looked at it was something in the neighborhood of like 75% of the podium ended up being like a decent name rider.
That's pretty good.
Okay, well, 2018, Remco Evenepoel first, Luke Plapp second, third is Andrea Piccolo, who allegedly got busted for transferring drugs across the world and now has an OnlyFans account. Fourth is Michael Hessmann, the German guy from Visma who got fired for the positive test.
Contamination,
I think. But on a positive note, 8 was a friend of the podcast, Joe Laverick.
Yeah.
So that's fun. So maybe we could bump him up to 6th.
Less than a year later, Evenepoel had won his first World Tour Classic at San Sebastian. And he was almost still eligible for the junior ranks. He was 1 year into the eligibility for under 23 when he won his first World Tour race, which is bananas.
So there we go.
Which brings us to the U23 debate. Which brings us to the U23 debate. This is going to be the last little segment before we take a short break. All right, so here's to set the debate up. The new rules, Kit. They're saying from next year, if you're on a World Tour team, you can't race the U23 race at Worlds?
I think it's something like that, yeah. And so the debate, I'm sure it had been raging a little bit under the surface before then, but it came out of Alex Sigart's... Well, everyone started talking about it after Alex Sigart won the under-23 European title with a time that was faster than Eduardo Affini's elite winning time. So it's not only did a chap who just won a World Tour time trial at the Renui Tour win the under-23 title, but he was actually faster than all the elites who raced that day as well. Now,
sounds like the elites should have gone faster. What are they doing?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was going to say, Evenepoel and Ganna weren't there, but Affini was there, and he came third at the World Championships this weekend. So they were a good bunch. But anyway, so yeah, this then brought to light a new rule that I think I'm not sure how Sigart's, because he's on a pro team. And he's staying on the pro team. He re-signed with Lotto. They may be moving up in a couple of years, but for the time being, I think it's if you've got a World Tour contract, then you aren't eligible. Now, I don't know about the small print there. There might be some small print. And as far as I'm concerned, whenever I see that an under-23 title has been taken by somebody whose name I know very well, because they've been racing a Grand Tour, for instance, then I'm a bit like, is this what the under-23 category is for?
Well, the under-23 category is for determining who is the best under-23 rider.
Yes.
So I get it, right? Like I get if you're not on a World Tour team, you don't have the support of a World Tour team, and you show up and you don't have maybe the fanciest bike in the world, and although let's be honest, anybody who's going to be at that level can get the same stuff if they need to. But, you don't have the support of a Visma or the support of an Ineos or the support of a whatever. Shouldn't the U23 category be won by the best rider who is under 23? Isn't that the whole point? And you can't just say, oh, no, you're too good for the U23 category, so you don't qualify anymore. Then what's the point of the whole category? What's the...
Yeah, my argument is they need to redefine the category, call it something else, because I mean, if you just to bring Evenepoel back into the picture again, he could have won the World Championships if he wanted to at under 23 level 4 times after he signed a World Tour contract. So my view would be you change the category, and it shouldn't be for everyone in the World Tour. I mean, the chap who came third in the time trial was Jan Christen, who. Okay, he has got a few wins, but he's not got a World Tour win. He races for UAE, and he's in his first year as a World Tour rider. So if I was going to define the category, I'd call it the development or the
amateur,
or the amateur category. Although there are amateur World Championships.
Well, I mean, amateur World Championships tend to get won by 45-year-old dudes on
yes,
stuff.
I know. No, I'm skating over that.
I wonder why.
But yeah, so I think you should qualify for the renamed development category as long as you haven't won a World Tour race and you haven't raced a Grand Tour or a monument.
I feel like that would get too complicated. I think if you have a pro contract, you would just be ineligible for this.
Well, that's
right?
fair. Yeah, but I mean, but then you have got some riders like some of the, bless them, Ineos Grenadiers teenagers who probably shouldn't be there or they should be on a development team, who should get a chance to make themselves known so they can get a contract somewhere they'd be better prepared for the world.
Well, speaking of the under-23 time trial, I think it was the under-23 time trial. I don't think it was the junior one. Michael Leonard, the Canadian guy.
Oh, he won the time trial at the Tour de l'Avenir, did he? Or some recently? He
was disqualified from the under-23 time trial because his bike did not fit the UCI's regulations. And he was being taught, someone was interviewing him as this was all unfolding, and they were like, so what's wrong with your bike? And he was like, I don't really know. So maybe sometimes it's not great to have all that support. Yeah. I've heard that maybe it was to do with his handlebars. So maybe that's quite an easy thing to get outside the regulations, I guess.
Are there different rules for under 23? No.
There's different rules for juniors.
So Ineos screwed him over then?
Yeah. I don't...
Maybe not Ineos. It might be something else.
Might have been his personal coach or something else,
Yeah. I don't know. The whole thing is like Riley Amos, for example, on the mountain bike side, he won the U23 World Cup. He's won most of them, right? He will win the whole series, and also finished 7th at the elite Olympics this summer, right? So do you tell him he can't race U23 anymore? And there are some U23s that they can bump up. They can race the elites if they want to, but at the same time, kids 21, 22 years old, win the races while you get to win the races. Because if you stick him in the elite field, he's going to get bounced around in 10th to 15th most of the time, right? So
yeah, especially if you're from somewhere not in Riley's case, but if you're Alex Sigart, for instance, the chap who he spawned the conversation this time, he's Belgian, so he, even without Evenepoel at the race and Van Aert, he wasn't really going to be in the picture. For the selectors. I mean, he apparently did want to race. He chose to race under 23. So having just won at the Renouille Tour, he might have got might have been welcomed. But he wanted to get a chance to take the title.
It's just...
I think you can race it until it becomes personally embarrassing to do so. If Evenepoel,
Pogacar.
Yeah, if they kept on doing it, Evan would have been they'd have felt some sort of shame. But you can win one and then you move on.
Territory.
So you don't get to wear the jersey. If you've got a World Tour contract, you don't get to wear the jersey.
It's true.
Well, time trialists don't really get to wear it anyway, really, do they? How many times do they actually wear that jersey? I don't think that matters as much.
They wear it in training all the time. I suppose you could still if you were under 23 title, if you were under 23 champion.
I would love to see how much more time trial world champions train on their time trial bike so they can wear the jersey.
Maybe that's a reason that specialists were once upon a time, but now they've got to spend more time going up hills. Yeah, I mean, Evenepoel's going to be a real target, isn't he? With his gold bikes and his rainbows.
It's going to be pretty easy to spot.
Too much. It's probably a bit too much bling.
Pretty easy to spot.
It's all getting a bit Cristiano Ronaldo, to be honest. Just too...
I do like the gold spray on his bikes, though. It's a good...
It's a lot.
Well, I hate gold bikes. Let's just clarify that. But of all the gold sprays, the gold paint jobs that we've had, the detailing has been done well by Specialized. It looks like gold plate.
They have a really good paint shop.
It actually looks gold too.
Yeah, really good paint shop.
All I'm hearing is Kit likes gold bikes.
No, it's too much.
Yeah. I don't know. This whole U23 debate
looks better than his jersey. But anyway,
this whole U23 debate is it gets a bit sort of, and maybe this is just me being old and grumpy. It gets a little bit participation medley. It's if you're not the fastest U23, sorry, you don't get to win the U23 World Championships. Someone is going to be faster than you. If they want to upgrade themselves, or they want to go race the elite, that's on them. But I think that those riders have every right to stay in their category and win that category. Yep. Right? It's
get into a similar debate when you look at the European Championship starting list. And there were 30 riders there, and a lot of teams chose just not to send anyone, and some of them were really quite good. And so you feel a bit sad for some of them.
All right.
Yeah. No. It's an interesting one, but it's it's the UCI. We're not going to sort it out. They're not going to.
How about this? Leave it be. We will. If you recall, you can send us little voice notes, right? So if you head to escapecollective.com/hello and you click on the spin cycle option, you can send us a voice note. And if you have pertinent thoughts on this, I don't know, if you maybe you raced the U23 Worlds one time, or you have a child who did, or you're related to this, or you just have an opinion about it, drop your opinion in there and we'll play it next week. How about that? All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're talking Tashkent City cycling team. Welcome back, everybody, and welcome, Abby Mickey. How are you, Abby?
Hey, good. How are you all?
We're doing great. It's good to have you on the show. Can you tell us about Tashkent?
I can. So Tashkent City is this Uzbekistan team that was kind of controversial this year for being one of the highest ranked continental teams on the circuit. They got automatic entry to any World Tour races they wanted, which included, the Grand Tours, the Giro, the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift. And things kind of started to go sideways in the very beginning at Tour de Suisse when none of their riders were able to finish the stage race. They went on to the Giro d'Italia, and the same thing happened. And but at that point, it became clear that their entry into the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift was going to be a little bit of a problem, especially when it's such a coveted event for so many teams. It can really make or break sponsorships for teams. So yeah, this is kind of where this year has been, but they've been on people's radar for a while because of how they were able to gather that many points. A lot of races in Uzbekistan where their riders would sweep the podium, sweep all the points, basically. Races that didn't actually happen. They had allegedly. They had
allegedly mystery race.
They had a bunch of races actually, or points stripped by the UCI because of this, but they were still able to rank high enough to qualify for the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift. Come the race. Oh, they also have they have a controversial member on their team, Olga Zabelinskaya, who Olympic bronze medalist in London 2012, and has had a complicated past and some not so fun
I love
doping.
Very diplomatic. Very diplomatic.
She also used to compete for Russia and is now racing for Uzbekistan. And she's kind of their most well-known. They have one other rider, Yanina Koskova, who, she's pretty impressive, actually. She was their only rider to finish the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift in 47th, ahead of entire World Tour teams on her own. Most of her team was out after the first 4 stages, but all of the riders were forced to stay at the race and continue riding all the stages before the peloton started. So at the race, they kind of were approached by the media and asked about the situation where the riders weren't finishing races going into the tour, and why were they there basically. And the team manager said that going to the race, he knew that none of the women were going to finish the tour, but he wanted to make a point, and that it was the UCI's problem and not his, that they had got an automatic invite. He also kind of tried to, shame the internet by saying that all the girls none of them can speak English, but that all the girls were reading the comments about them via Google Translate on the internet and crying at night, which was just, it's your fault, man. Come on. So that's kind of where a lot of the controversy this summer was, but it's kind of come back into everyone's minds because Yanina Koskova, who also raced at the Olympics alongside Olga Zabelinskaya, she has been posting to her Instagram kind of cryptic stories about how she's struggling to get to the World Championships. There was the first one kind of hinted that the team had folded with immediate effect. After they had claimed at the tour that the whole point of the team was developing women's cycling in Uzbekistan. The team is folded after, getting riders to the Olympics, which was one of their major aims. And now she's receiving minimal, if any, support from Uzbekistan's cycling federation, or from the team to get to the World Championships. She had one ticket that just wasn't going to work, and so she bought her own ticket, and then the federation was refusing to give her a bike, and now she's flying there with her training bike. So it's a huge mess, really.
Yeah, they'd booked her ticket to get in to Zurich the day before the race, so she was like, this isn't going to work. And then they decided to not give her her race bike and wheels because of her original Instagram story. So they were like, we didn't like what you said, so you can't have this now. So then, yeah, she booked it. So she will get there. But yeah, it's a sad end to a tale that was not necessarily that happy. Do you think this will bring about change, Abby, in how these things are done, or do you think it's like one of those blips that then kind of gets forgotten eventually?
The situation will change in terms of which teams are selected to race the World Tour races next year with the introduction of the pro team category, which teams have to qualify to be a pro team, which includes paying all their riders. And I would be shocked if any of those women were paid at all in their time on Tashkent City. I reached out to the team actually to ask some questions last week and have yet to hear back. So we still actually don't have an official confirmation that the team has folded with immediate effect, although it seems pretty clear that that is the case. But yeah, I haven't heard back from team management yet. But yeah, it's definitely not going to be. This situation seems to be a one-off with the new rules in place next year with the pro team category and which teams will be able to actually get into those races. We won't have any women in World Tour races next year who don't make a salary with the pro team category. So that in and of itself is growth. And yeah, I just feel for the riders because it's obviously the management are the ones who made the decision to kind of game the system and get them into these races, and then kind of threw these women into the deep end where they probably didn't belong. And that's a really good way to make sure that they all quit cycling. And you do have riders with talent on that team, and with a bit of a different path, it could have been a very different story.
I say like the line between sort of cool development story and chaos is very narrow here. Right? Like if things had gone slightly differently, if a couple of those riders had been slightly better, like able to hang, for example, at the Tour, we would be talking about like, wow, they maybe have gained the system, but they put these riders on a pedestal and now they've got better teams, or like what it could have gone so many better ways with, well, probably slightly better intent is probably the real fundamental problem here.
Fact check myself really quick. Yanina also finished the Giro. She was their only rider to finish the Giro as well.
And so for her to race the World Championships is vitally important for her career as well, isn't it? If she wants to carry on cycling, she kind of needs to be there, especially after all the nonsense that's been. So although all of this, it almost seems like she's being publicly punished for speaking out, which she's absolutely right to do, because obviously she's trying very hard to be a pro cyclist. Yeah, the World Championships is almost like you can understand why she's so emotional and passionate about it, because it might be her last chance to really get her name out there.
Yeah, I mean, she's on people's radar now, but not necessarily for her results, which honestly she could be. She's, she finished the Giro and the Tour completely on her own. She's won races in Europe in 2023. She won in 2023 she won a stage of Trofeo Ponente in Rosa, and she has won races in like Slovenia and stuff. So she's won a ton of races in Uzbekistan, but whether or not that's legit after, what we know about the federation and how they kind of game the system. But she's won races outside of Uzbekistan. So yeah, getting to the Tour getting to the World Championships for her is a huge deal if she wants to keep racing her bike.
She needs the opportunities, yeah. And to be looked after by the sounds of it.
I mean, she's gaining a lot of fans by speaking out, that's for sure. And she already had kind of picked up a fan base with, being the only one to finish the Tour. There's so many eyes on the Tour, and the fact that she finished ahead of, entire World Tour teams was kind of a big deal.
Well, thanks for keeping us updated, Abby. If you do hear back from the team, obviously there'll be a story up on the site, I'm sure. Kind of a simultaneously sad, and maybe part of the reason it's so sad is there was sort of potential there, and there is still potential there for at least a couple of the riders. But let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to bring Dane on. We're going to talk World Champs preview for this weekend. Welcome back, everybody, and welcome Dane. Dane.
Hey, Caley.
Is there a bike race this weekend?
There is. There's bike racing going on all week. If you want to watch 19 and under or 23 and under people, you get to do that all week. Lots going on. And then the elite men and women this weekend, road racing. We had the time trial last weekend, road racing this weekend. Chance to ride in the rainbow jersey for a year coming up.
Tell me about the course. Tell me about favorites, things like that. Let's start with the women's race.
So the course is climber friendly. We talked about this a little bit on how the race was won, how you would probably expect that being in Switzerland. But it's not like they're going up any huge mountains. They're just going in and around Zurich, and there's a climb. It's the Nicholson climb. And it's like 2K-ish. It's about 6% gradient, and they go over it a bunch. So it's a circuit. And that's sort of the main feature of the circuit. And it's not super hard, this climb, but they're going to go over it enough that you would think it's going to kind of weed out anybody who can't climb pretty well. So there's a high likelihood of it being a punchy climber that wins this race. That's true on both sides, on both the men's and the women's race. Both of the races are going to go up and over this climb. The women will do it, a certain number of times, and the men will do it a little bit more. But it's going to be the same main feature that's going to decide this race. It
looks very like a lot of the races that one Mr. Mark Hershey has been doing a lot lately.
You're not wrong, Kit. I would say that it's a great race for someone who has done big things in races like the Bretagne Classic, which has a pretty similar look to it. However, also a great race for those who can shine on the streets of Montreal. In fact, the Nicholson climb is very similar to the main climb on the GP Montreal, which was, of course, won by Tadej Pogačar earlier this year. I'm actually shocked by how much he's the favorite with the bookies for this race. Like, you don't usually see an odds-on favorite for a one-day because it's just so many things that can happen in a one-day race. Tactics play such a huge role. You see it in a Grand Tour a lot more often that a rider is favored over the field. But you don't see that very often in a one-day race. But Pogačar is pretty heavily the odds-on favorite for this World's course. And that is, even for him, I'm surprised at how much he's the favorite. But it does suit him so well.
What's great about this is that we have, we had the Olympics earlier this year, which had a similar, the finale was similar. Obviously, the climb wasn't as long, but it's got that circuit situation. And we really needed Pogačar to be at the Olympics so that Evenepoel would have a challenger. And this weekend, Evenepoel has a challenger in Pogačar, who is the only man. Obviously, he's not the only man. But he's the chief contender to stop Evenepoel from doing the double-double, which would be quite a big, quite is completely the wrong quantifier. It would be a very big story if Evenepoel was to win.
I think the climb here it's not so hard. It's not, the 6% is not the kind of gradient that's going to make it an obvious Pogačar destroying the field kind of thing. And I feel like Evenepoel might be able to hold on if Pogačar decides to attack. The question is he going to attack with 3 climbs to go, like 90K out? Is he going to attack 2? Like how far out is Pogačar going to go? Or how far is Evenepoel going to go? And then the other big question is,
can anyone else we never got because Pogačar broke his wrist.
That's right. Yeah, and hopefully we'll get something like that. There is a big difference, though, in this equation, which is Mathieu Evenepoel is here. And I think Evenepoel is just going to try to hold on to those guys attacking because the race does end with easier roads. And that means that if Pogačar and Evenepoel can't drop Evenepoel, then we could get a sprint. And that changes everything.
Another one to throw in there, if we're talking favourites or people we're going to see doing something interesting, Michael Matthews, who always does well at World Championships. Well, not always, but he quite often does well at World. And so Jonny is making a great face right now. But, so my approach to any race where there's a big favourite is to claw my way through any of the underdogs and to create a massive group of people that I will root for and then be disappointed by, of which Mark Hershey is one. But Matthews, he was quite good in Canada and he finally won there. He's a multiple medalist at World Championships. Him and Valentin Madouas and Julien Alaphilippe and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It could be a very, very good race. I fear it may be a solo win, and then we'll have written the race report 60 kilometres earlier, but we'll see.
Yeah, we also need to point out the number of men on the U.S. team. We have quite a large selection, which is very unusual for the United States, but I think mostly thanks to Matteo Jorgensen. We've got a full complement of riders. The United States, and Jorgensen does look like a pretty solid candidate for this race. Another
that would be very
potential.
Good. I would
Potential contender.
like that.
Yeah, but the podcast the next week could probably be quite unbearable, is the only thing.
Well,
Don't
Dane
worry,
won't be here. It's fine.
I'll be on vacation, so you won't have to deal with my rah-rah patriotism, but Caley would hopefully give you a double dose of it.
Yeah, but Dane, you're going to be in Europe, so it's just going to be emanating, and I'll probably be able to feel it, seeing as you'll be so close. Yeah. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Have we got any Brits, Johnny? Is there anyone we can root for?
Steamy windows.
Steamy windows, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's going to be...
I'm just looking at the Strava KOM on it. 6.5 minutes is the Strava KOM at the moment.
Oh, the Viticon.
Yeah. If I'm looking at the right one, I'm pretty sure I'm looking at the right one because obviously it goes up one side, down the other, but I'm pretty sure this is the correct side. Although both sides look to be about 6.5 minutes. And that is, they will go faster than that because that's a VAM of only 1,200. And they will definitely go faster than that. So this is a 4 or 5 minute climb probably.
Which is the kind of effort that Evenepoel thrives with. It's just, the gradient might be just enough that Pogacar and Evenepoel, lighter guys than Evenepoel are going to have the edge here. But
Van der Poel's quite light now.
Contender.
Did you see that photo of him?
Yeah.
I mean, it's at a weird angle, but he's like doing a weird thing with his eyes, but he looks crazy skinny. Lean is an understatement. Can I slightly derail this and ask a quick question about Strava? Because as soon as you mentioned it, why is there free reign for everyone to make a million different segments? Why can't there be like the equivalent of a Wikipedia editor guy who goes around cleaning it all up? Because it's so dumb.
It's dumb.
Why have they not fixed that yet?
I agree. Well, so they do hide segments. So like if you do your ride, and you can click at the bottom. This is only on desktop, I think, not in the mobile app. There's hidden segments. So you actually went over a lot more segments that show up. You can click like show hidden segments, and there's usually like a whole another list below that. So they already do a bit of sorting, and they do that based off of like how many people look at a given segment. So there's a bit of that happening, kind of algorithmically.
There used to be a segment down near where I used to live that was something like Jonny dropped his glasses, and it's the stint at which this chap realised he'd lost his glasses and went back for them, and then there's somebody made it a segment, but it's actually just a stretch of road.
Yeah, I don't find that charming. I normally would, but I don't. Anyway, back to Worlds. Adam Yates.
Adam Yates. Yeah. What a
Audrey Cordon-Ragot has the QOM.
Oh,
cool. I like.
And one of the segments has been flagged as dangerous.
Good.
Which I think is probably nonsense.
Who's going to win the women's race? Or is that
Vollering?
Is Abby doing a preview for Wheel Talk?
There's really quite a different situation in the women's race in that there's two major favorites, and they are major favorites who often ride for the same team, at least for the rest of the year.
Well, and even when they race for the same team, they race each other.
Yes, we've seen them even when they race for the same team have some questionable dynamics between them. Yeah, so Lada Kopecky hoping to defend the world title, and Demi Vollering on terrain that I think suits her a little bit better
She's
than
also going to have a fire burning inside of her.
Yes, indeed. I would imagine that Kopecky will also be very motivated. True. But yeah, and I think the Dutch team is going to be really strong. But Kopecky is currently your bookie's favorite, and has the slight edge there, so that's an interesting one. And I would imagine it's got to be between those two, Kopecky and Vollering, but Marianne Vos is also a pretty good bike rider.
That'd be fun.
At least along the Borghini for Italy. Puck Peters kind of come into her own, and it's the sort of worlds that maybe Castelnuovo has a chance on. It's not quite hard enough, maybe, but
yeah, I don't think it's quite hard enough. But you never know. It's not that far off of the like Binda course that she's done quite well on before.
And we've seen when the favorites are all looking at each other, you can get a surprise winner.
Oh yeah,
and maybe a Kristen Faulkner can indeed shock the world with another win.
She won't be allowed to get it away.
No. Well, yeah, if you want sort of full preview of the women's race, obviously Wheel Talk this week. They're going to dive into that, and then they'll break down the race afterward next week. I think it is time for us, though, to say goodbye and head into After Dark. I'm stoked for the races this weekend. I'm hoping you are as well. They're going to be really good. I love this sort of punchy. Really good. They're going to be good. These sort of punchy worlds courses are always great. And even if we get 60K flyers, it's still exciting in its own way. So we'll be back next week to chat all about it. plus whatever else is happening in the world of bicycles, we're going to head into the darkness, the after darkness, where we're going to talk about where we think world should be. All right. If you're not already a member, head over to escapecollective.com/member and sign up. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.